You'll never guess which player within the Central Division has been linked to the Minnesota Wild. Could a trade happen? We'll discuss on today's episode of Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Whether this is your first listen to the show, we're glad to have you along and hope that you stick with us through the rest of the offseason into next season as well. If you are one of the everydayers that tunes in each and every day of the week, we're glad to have you back. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we take a look at the trade waters through the Central Division. We'll talk about some reports suggesting that Pierre Luc Dubois is ready to move on from the Winnipeg Jets and a team that has been linked potentially to his services. We'll also take a look at the Brock Boeser situation to see if that is even still a priority for the Minnesota Wild. And we'll look at a couple of guys on the roster right now who could potentially be dealt, as well as a flurry of trades by the Columbus Blue Jackets. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, joined as we are every Monday by Alex Micheletti. And Alex, Cup final going on right now, but the trade winds have picked up thanks to the Columbus Blue Jackets going for it and not really wanting to stick to the rebuild plan. And so they've really kicked off the trade season, which should be a busy one here over the next couple of months.
Yeah, it seems like, now that we know that the cap isn't going up a whole lot, it seems like the trade route is more of the way that teams want to go. And with the free agent class this summer, it's not that great either. And so you're looking at, a lot of teams like the Winnipeg Jets that have veterans that don't want to be in a rebuild, and so they are asking their agents to request trades. And so that's another team that is going to be extremely active, and hopefully we see a lot of movement during the draft too, which always makes it more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's start with the Winnipeg Jets because they have two pretty prominent names that have made it very publicly known that they're not really interested in signing long-term extensions. Pierre Luc Dubois, the first, he's not even amenable to a bridge deal with the Winnipeg Jets, and so deciding, hey, let's get the heck out of here before they start throwing deck chairs overboard. And Connor Hellebuyck, another guy who said, no, I don't think we're going to do an extension here. So Winnipeg's going to be very busy, but as we heard from Jeff Merrick on the 32 Thoughts podcast, dropped this nugget. I think Pierre Luc Dubois would play on the New York Rangers and the Minnesota Wild. Let's just get right out there, right in front of this. I don't know that there is a way to make this work, but it's intriguing because you don't just throw that out there for no reason.
Yeah, 100%. And he would be the absolute perfect fit for this Wild team too. He plays with bite. He's the type of player that I think Bill Guerin would love to have on this Wild team too. And he has so much skill, can win face-offs, plays, like I said, hard, physical, and can score and set up. And, he complement Kirill Kaprizov so well. And so, yeah, you don't just throw that out there for sure. To make it work, you'd have to move one of the big ticket guys on this team. So, you're looking right at that decor where a lot of the money is made. And so you might have to move one of those guys. And so, that's the issue too with the Wild is, those defensemen, Brodin, Spurgeon, they can win and they can help you get your team to the playoffs. But in the playoffs, what keeps happening. They keep losing right away. And so, that's that. I think if you were to try to get a number one center now in a trade scenario this summer, you would have to move Brodin or Spurgeon, and they can bring a ton back just because they're great, great regular season defensemen. For whatever reason, in the postseason, there's been some struggles with this organization, but that doesn't mean there would be elsewhere. So it's definitely intriguing though, because like I said, he's a heck of a player. He would fit tremendously here. It would solve the problem for the next decade, and so I'd be all in for a guy like him.
Yeah, because let's throw it out there too. He was 24 this past season, a season in which he scored 27 goals. He had 63 points. He plays on the power play. He had 11 power play goals this past season. He had 23 power play points. Shot 13.2% for the season on 200 shots. Plays 18 and a half minutes per game, just under 49% in the faceoff circle. And when he's really rolling, he is a guy that can give you, over 100 hits, right around 50 blocks a season. So he's very physical. He racks up some penalty minutes, but let's be honest, who doesn't on this team? So the only thing that I think is the major roadblock here, because this is where you get into, you have that prospect pool that is ranked as the best in the NHL. This is where you either have those guys play roles on this team, or you deal some assets to help acquire. Because as we've talked about on this show a lot, you don't just find a number one center laying around. They typically do not get to free agency. So you either have to draft one, which means being bad enough to draft in the top 5 and get one of those guys, or you have to trade for one. And so if the Wild are going to be drafting in the mid-20s and are not going to do what needs to be done, and let's be clear too, it's not as simple as just flipping a switch and saying, all right, we're going to be really, really bad for 2 years and then flipping it back on. Like, look at what's
happened. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, look at what's happened with Anaheim. Look at what's happened with Chicago. Is a lot of times you say, all right, we're going to do this for 2 years. It ends up being 5, 6, 7, 8. And so if the Wild are not going to go down that road, trade is the only option for them to acquire somebody that fits the bill as a number one center.
Yeah, 100%. And with the prospect pool where it is too, you can't afford to, trade some of these guys because, like we all know too, there's not going to be room for all of them. That decor is starting, the prospect pool is starting to really fill up, and so you can only keep 6 or 7 defensemen, and so at some point they're going to have to trade some of these guys too, and so whatever it can do to help get a another top end center, I'm all for it, and I know Wild fans are too. And it's just I don't think this franchise could ever end up doing what Chicago and Anaheim are doing. I don't think fans, because this is such a smart fan base, they know the game of hockey, and so I just don't think they would put up with it. You'd see empty building, and it would not be good. The radio calls and our podcast comments and everything, pitchforks would be out. It would not be good.
And so then you're left down the trade route, and I mean it's an out of the box thought, but I don't think it should be dismissed because, like we said, 25 years old, could definitely fill that spot. The thing that is worrisome is what his potential contract could look like. There have been some rumors that he could be approaching $9 million a season, which again, for a 25-year-old, that's not that bad. It's just you have to figure out a way to make all that money work too, in addition to making the trade and sending
Right.
some players. So it's interesting, but again, if you're going to cross free agency off, if you're going to cross drafting high off the list, if you're going to ever get a number one guy, you're going to have to go the trade route.
In situations like this, Pierre Luc Dubois, they don't come around a whole lot too, where this guy does not want to re-sign with his team and is clearly wanting a demand this summer, and so you at least reach out to Winnipeg and see what it would take, and then figure it out from there. Make the trade, and then you can make the moves. And a guy like Bill Guerin, we see time and time again, he's not afraid to change things up, and loyalty, it's thrown out the even if you've been here a long time, look at the Parise Suter buyouts, and so he's all about making the team better no matter what, and so you at least give them a call and see what it would take.
Yeah, 100%. This is similar to the Jack Eichel situation.
Mm-hmm.
And the Wild were heavily linked to Eichel there, ended up not pulling the trigger on the deal. And so maybe this time they do go in on Dubois. We'll just have to wait and see. And for Winnipeg, good luck, because you're going to have Hellebuck leaving. You're going to have Dubois leaving.
Probably Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler's not happy because oh my goodness, that post-game press conference, he was calling out Blake Wheeler. He didn't say his name, but that was an interesting choice by our mem god coach in Winnipeg there. Rick Bonus, his face and him with Dean this past season, we'll never forget it. That was quite the moment for sure. Yeah. And yeah, it's gonna be big time changes coming in Winnipeg this summer.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you talk about a Winnipeg team that was good enough to get to the postseason and now is probably beginning a teardown, and you have another team that the Wild are very familiar with that did not make the postseason, but maybe is trending in a better direction. And so we'll take a look at another trendy trade rumor, that being Mr. Brock Boeser, and see if there is anything still there as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode is brought to you by a product I use every single day of the week. That, of course, is AG1 by Athletic Greens. Maybe you're just like me. You want to get healthy and eat well, but it's always easier said than done. That's no longer the case with AG1. With one delicious scoop of AG1 in a glass of water each day, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. It can be hard and expensive to keep track of different supplements and vitamins, not to mention how hard it can be on your stomach. AG1 costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Continuing today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, thanks for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. For the everydayers, we have a lot coming up for you here this week. We'll continue our player evals as we move through the third line to the fourth line. And we will also be looking at a couple of other big picture topics as well, plus working on a crossover as well throughout the later part of the week. So a lot to stay tuned to here on Locked On Wild. We continue our trade chat with Alex Micheletti. Alex, Brock Boeser was linked to the Minnesota Wild a lot during the season because the Vancouver Canucks sprung a leak Bruce Boudreau was allowed to walk the plank in a very public manner that still irks me to this day. But then you have Rick Tocchet, who comes in and, by all accounts, seemed to right the ship a little bit. He was able to get the team just kind of going in a better direction. But obviously, with Boeser being from Minnesota, there are always going to be those links. However, the Marcus Johansson trade and subsequent extension signing has probably put those trade rumors to rest, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's tough. When your agent is calling Bill Guerin and trying to get him here. It's not just the agent trying to do that. Brock would love to be back here, and everything that he's been through with his father passing and just being back home. He still has a place here, and so I think that's always going to be the draw for him to hopefully one day be with the Wild. But with Johansson, that money is what would be for Brock. And the way that Marcus played down the stretch, he looked really great, and so it was worth it. They had to pick between him and Nyquist, and they went with Johansson. They think that chemistry is going to continue with Boldy, and they better hope it does. And so when they invested him in that type of money that he got, and so it's gonna be interesting to see if he can continue that type of play. He's a streaky type of player, and so hopefully he can keep it going.
Well, and the fascinating thing with Boeser was you look at the two teams that were most active in the trade market for him. It was the Wild and it was Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw both teams go alternate routes. The Penguins ended up getting Mikael Granlund, and
that made no sense. That probably that's what got Hextall fired because it made no sense.
Yeah, it was a strange decision by Pittsburgh to go that route, and you saw the Wilds get Johansson, and he looked really good, and it led to Boeser kind of walking his desire to be traded back. And so I wonder if the fact that he has been a little more vocal about his desire to stay in Vancouver for now, if he did want to just kind of see how things went with Tocchet, and if he decides, hey, this is a spot that I want to stay, or if he just didn't want to go through all that headache of being traded and is somebody who is more than likely to walk once he hits free agency.
Yeah, 100%. And I think Rick Tocchet did a really good job. When Wild played that team late in the season, they looked so much better in Tocquet's system. And you look at a guy like Elias Pettersson, he's ready to be superstar level the way he played down the stretch. So I think Brock would love to play with him, and we'll see if they do that next season. And Kuzmenko, that Russian, he is incredible too. These Russians, when they get going, they're so fun to watch. The skill is absolutely incredible, and I think he's just as good as Kaprizov, and so they definitely have a good one on their hand, and they have a good goalie in Demko, and so we'll see if Brock, if he can have a huge season, that if he can get 60, 70 points, that's going to set him up for another big payday.
Yeah, and if he is able to put on a really strong showing this season for Vancouver, and if the Canucks, as we probably expect, are not in a postseason push at the deadline, that would be the opportunity for them to really maximize what they get for him. And it could work out the same way that we anticipate things are going to work out with, say, Patrick Kane, where you just end up going back once the season is over. So it's basically like you take a vacation for like 2 months, and then you just go right back to where you were.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that too. It doesn't, it doesn't wreck your legacy with the team too, or no one's gonna care if you do that. We see it all the time in sports. It's where, it's where you're comfortable, but you try to win a ring with another team, and if it doesn't work out, hey, at least you tried, and you don't look back and say, shoot, I should have done that, so it's always worth a chance to get that Stanley Cup ring, because it doesn't come too often. So
right. You don't you don't end up going there every year. So
right.
maximize that opportunity, and then just go back once the season's done. I would say, based off of the two situations here, I'd probably go in terms of likelihood. And I'm not saying either of these situations are likely, but I would put an acquisition of Pierre Luc Dubois above Brock Boeser at this point. I just think
I would too.
Yeah. I mean, just don't see as much of a fit for Boeser anymore as we did like at this same time last year.
Yeah, and well, we can look at this past trade deadline. No one ever thought John Klingberg was going to end up with the Wild, and then Bill gets Klingberg at the last second at the trade deadline, and it was only because Verbeek called him back, and after he said he wasn't going to trade Klingberg, and then decided to do it. Bill kind of bullied him into making that trade, and it didn't work out in the end, but it was worth a shot. Because they had lost all faith in Calen Addison. There was no way they were going to ever play him in the playoffs, and so you try to get a veteran that has put up a lot of points in this league and in postseason play, and it just, for whatever reason, it didn't work. I wouldn't call it a failure, but it just, when it came time in the playoffs, didn't do enough.
Yeah, it didn't have the intended effect.
Right.
He ended up impacting more of the 5-on-5 scoring than he did the power play. And the power play was the reason that Klingberg was brought in.
Right.
So that's kind of how that went. To finish the show today, we've got a few names who have been linked to potential trade opportunities, and so we're going to rank them as to which is most likely to be dealt this offseason. We'll discuss all that as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, thanks for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Everydayers tune in for the defenseman on the third pairing. That's going to be an adventure in player evals this week. Plus, we'll be checking in with some of our regular contributors as well throughout the week here also. So a busy one for you as we move closer to the NHL draft. Final portion of our chat with Alex Micheletti today. And Alex, let's talk about guys like Alex Goligoski, Calen Addison, Brandon Duhaime now on this list potentially. And it sounds like Bill Guerin has met with Goligoski kind of to see where he's at, where things go from here. Haven't had any official word yet as to whether or not he's waived his no movement clause, but it would seem like he is going to, wouldn't it? You don't want to go through another season of being the seventh defenseman for like 80% of the games.
Yeah, the interesting with him, if he does decide to wait it, is finding an actual team that will want to take on the 37-year-old. But there are teams out there that just love to take on money, and maybe a trip back to the desert for Alex in the Arizona Coyotes. Maybe he'd be willing to do that just for playing time, even though it's not an ideal situation down there.
Columbus. I mean, they're just overhauling their D pairings completely.
Anaheim, they need veteran defense, with all those young guys. That's definitely could be a team that you could call. Maybe Buffalo. It's a lot of these teams have young defensemen that they could use a veteran to help them.
Do we think it's likely? Is it even possible that we see the Wilds trade not only Goligoski but Merrill and Calen Addison as well? Or is that pulling too much of that lower level depth off the table?
I think it would be ideal, because then you could get in a guy like Luke Schenn that we've talked about. That would be such a good fit for this team. A heavy physical guy that could really help them in the playoffs, because time and time again we see the defensemen just beat up physically, and sometimes it's not always just that they're small, it's just that they just get beat up. And so it would be nice to have a guy like that. He'd be a perfect fit. He's been in deep playoff runs, and so it'd be nice to move some of those guys out, and then prepare for the Damon Hunts, the Jack Pirts of the world. Not for this season, but give them another year, and they'd be ready to to fight for a roster spot for sure.
Yeah, and if those guys are at Iowa, then
Right.
you have the potential to see them on limited basis, plural. You have an opportunity to see them on a limited basis. There we go. In injury situations, or if you just end up being like, no, we don't want to see this guy for 60 games this year again. So I think freeing up that type of money would be advantageous, like you. Where I draw the line is what was reported by Joe Smith in one of his latest mailbag articles for The Athletic, is that if things potentially go awry, and this actually was more of an at-large Athletic article looking at potential trade targets for teams. If negotiations with Brandon Duhaime go awry, he could be added to the list of players traded as well, which I'm not super thrilled about.
Yeah, it'd be tough to lose an energy a guy like that. And he's been an important part of this team. You would hope that his agent they can figure something out and not overvalue Brandon Duhaime, because we know what he is. He scored under 10 goals, or was it right around there? Or
He had 9, I believe.
9. So it's hey, if you can get more than 2 million, go do it. There's plenty of guys in this league that would take the money that the Wild are offering. And so as much as it would hurt to trade him, the Wild can find a guy like him to replace. And so Connor Dewar, he'd take the money. And right. So he's already done it. So I think his agent will come to his senses, hopefully.
I think he'll stay with his two best buds here in Connor Dewar and Mason Shaw. Mm-hmm. Shaw will at some point this offseason be extended a contract so that he can continue to rehab here and see if he's able to make it back from another ACL surgery, which we're all hoping 100% that he does. And so I think that will be a factor in Duhaime staying. And so you have those three defensemen as your most likely targets to be moved. And whether they do, whether they don't, that's Bill Guerin's quest to fill out as this offseason goes along. Because I think you and I are both of the same mindset that there's going to be something done. You just get the feeling that there's going to be something done to go at this thing a little differently for this coming season, whether that be freeing up a big chunk of money or just kind of swapping out some pieces to try to just go at it a little different way. It does feel like they're not just going to go into next season and say, exact same roster, here we go.
Yeah, I think Bill Guerin is done with the run it back scheme. He's the anti-Timberwolves. The Timberwolves seem to look like they are just going to run it back with everybody, and that was a nightmare. I don't think I don't think Bill Guerin, just from the interviews that we've seen him with on K-Fan and just other outlets, it doesn't seem like he wants to run it back, and so it seems like there's going to be some moves. We know Matt Dumba's clearly not going to be back, and so that is going to be tough because he was the heart and soul of that decor, and so they're going to have to hope Brock Faber can replace him in that top four. If not, find another defenseman like a Luke Shen, like we talked about, and then have Brock stay on that third pairing and in sheltered minutes, and let him continue to grow as a NHL rookie defenseman, and figure out what you're going to do with some of these veteran forwards too, and see if teams could start calling on Marcus Foligno or reach out to other teams about him. And so they just can't run it back. They're going to have to continue to it's not a rebuild. It's just kind of just a reboot. Slide in guys and then in and out, and let some of these young guys that are on entry level contracts, finally get a 100% chance in the NHL. And Adam Beckman, I really hope he gets that chance, because every time he comes up here, it seems like he's doing something positive, and so
right.
he deserves a chance. He's been through this time in Iowa, and so it's time to give him a chance.
Yep, get him up here. Let us know in the comments if you are in or out on Pierre Luc Dubois. Where do you stand on the potential to bring in Dubois? It's worth monitoring to see if the Wilds are actually serious about trying to upgrade that 1C spot, because it feels like it's been an issue for a while. So maybe this is the one that they do. We'll see. But we will keep an eye on all of that and more as we further navigate through the offseason. That will do it for today's episode of Locked On Wild. So whether this is your first time listening to the show, or you are an everydayer that tunes in each and every day of the week, make sure that you take the time to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on your favorite podcast platforms so that you don't miss out on any new Wild content throughout the rest of the offseason and beyond. You can find all new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.